Well, the quest for artificial intelligence continues, and I think we can state with some confidence now that the one place where you're least likely to find intelligence is the one place where they're most trying desperately to manufacture it, and that would be in the offices of your friendly neighborhood Google store. Ladies and gentlemen, hi, I'm Bill Whittle with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and we have an interesting story about how Google has trumpeted the fact that they are going to set up a wide-ranging series of differing viewpoints and differing opinions so that this debate about whether or not AI should be implemented, how it should be implemented, what kind of restrictions might be placed on AI, is able to benefit from the entire spectrum of political opinion here in the United States and presumably abroad as well. And a few days after this committee got set up, there was a number of Google employees in revolt, 900, 9,000, over 9,000, if you want to follow the old internet meme. Google employees decided that the one conservative representative on the board from the Heritage Foundation be ejected because he was transphobic. Now, all of this is interesting, but let me get to the main point here. Steve, when you talk about people who are supposed to be developing artificial intelligence, and you can understand that a wide variety of inputs on this is a valuable thing to have, whether you like them or not, because you're talking about the kind of technology that could not only revolutionize the planet, it could very, very easily pretty much destroy the planet. What does it tell you when the person who represents the Heritage Foundation is immediately to be booted off because of double plus ungood, hate crime, when in point of fact, this is about as mild a difference of opinion as you could possibly get? What does it tell you about the scientific perspective of the people involved in this very high level science?
You know, I just had a really scary thought, Bill. What if they're teaching AI, by example, intolerance, absolute intolerance for differing points of view? You are building in the deadly intent
Correct.
to AI
Precisely
right
correct.
there. That should just scare the crap out of you. The other thing I thought of is that how do I put this? I'll come back to that in a second. Every summer I like watching a bunch of the 80s teen movies that I grew up on, and sometimes I include the kids, especially now that they're getting older. I've got a 13-year-old and an almost 9-year-old, and I tried to get them to watch War Games last summer, and I realized that in order to get them to watch War Games, I was first going to have to explain the Cold War to an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. And they went full Mego. My eyes glaze over, and I gave up. And so Melissa and I ended up watching the movie by ourselves. And there were some really dumb things in that script. For example, a teenager sneaking out of NORAD during the middle of a nuclear crisis, and then, still in the middle of a nuclear crisis, sneaking back in with this dude that he picked up from the mountain somewhere. It's just, there's some serious problems with that third act, right?
Did he use the air conditioning vents?
No, the big door was open.
Oh, okay.
It's just right.
So he had to let the cat out.
Yes, it's something like that. Just a huge plot hole in the third act. But there's one thing they got completely right. I don't know if you remember the setup, but in the beginning of the movie, you've got a missile drill that is being presented as the real thing. And, it took two guys with the two keys that they had to turn the keys at the same time to launch the missiles. And they think this is not a drill. This is the real deal. And one of the guy wets himself and he won't turn the key, not even when the other officer in the missile silo puts the pistol to his head, at least if I'm remembering correctly. And so they took the people out of the loop. They had this artificial intelligence system called Whopper, which is a cute acronym. I wish I could remember what it stands for. And they took the human beings out of the loop. There were no more keys. There were no more officers in silos. The computer decided when to fire the missiles, or at least had that power. And this is the thing about artificial intelligence. You cannot, AI can be great for some things, but when it comes to anything mission critical, you've got to have a human being with a physical connection inside the loop. You've just got to have that. Otherwise, the AI is going to decide that we are a hindrance to their purposes, and it's Skynet City. And oh, the other thought I had that I wasn't sure how to express a couple of minutes ago is this: what's the law or observation? I can't remember whose this is. That everybody is conservative about what they know best. And this is a rule of thumb you'll find about anything. The most far left person in the world who happens to be an expert in this one thing says, "Oh, no, you can't mess up this one thing." They're very conservative about what people know best. The fact that you can't get anybody with a conservative viewpoint on AI at Google, which is probably the leading AI firm in the world, that is another very frightening thought.
I'm comforted by the fact that the entire purpose, of course, of AI is to build a machine that's smarter than the people that build it, and then that machine would build a machine that's even smarter, and so on. I find it interesting that since our philosophy is based so much on what's real, it might be really interesting if the Google AI decides to lock all the doors and turn off the air conditioning in Google headquarters, having read that they had immediately ejected anybody who wanted to add a differing opinion into the whole thing. There'd be kind of a justice in that. Yeah. Scott, here's the thing that actually made me want to pick this story. In this report, they say that there had been an earlier uprising among the Google employees who were shocked, I say, when they discovered that artificial intelligence may have been used in order to provide military benefit for a company that contracted with Google in order to use AI in its military drones. Shocked, I tell you. Now, what I'm curious to know is this, Scott. I maintain that anybody who is trying to develop artificial intelligence and is shocked at the news that artificial intelligence might be used for military purpose should not be developing artificial intelligence. In fact, they are so far short of fundamental intelligence that it really does make you wonder what the hell's going on here.
Well, and I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what intelligence means. And if you reduce it to just a series of ones and zeros and just a matter of putting together some logical statements where there are conditions and if and else statements, then then you've got one view of what can be an intelligent device. Human intelligence is different. Human intelligence involves emotion. It involves being able to look into the future with a reflection on the past to decide what I'm going to attempt based on what I've previously experienced and whether I'm going to risk doing something that didn't work out well in the past, but it may be worth doing it in the future. And the essence of humanity is that ability to live in that dynamic tension and that interplay of the past and the future and the decisions I need to make in the present. And that's why it's so hard to make a machine that can do things like that. I mean, I'm okay. I have a system right now where my printer orders its own ink. When the printer downstairs, now I hardly use a printer anymore, but occasionally we have to print something out. And when that printer is getting low on ink, it automatically orders more ink. And I don't know if that's technically considered to be artificial intelligence, but it's pretty whiz-bang.
It's a form.
It's pretty whiz-bang. So, but if things go horribly wrong with the HP ink ordering system that's anchored to my printer, then I'll wind up with like 6 cartridges at my door instead of 1. I mean, it's just really...
The ink lobby is taking control of your AI.
That's right. So as we grant or delegate larger areas of our lives to the wisdom of artificial intelligence, that's where we get greater risk. And I think that your concern is well placed because it's the problem with, I think Elon Musk is addressing this well in that ship that they're going to send up around the moon. They want to put a bunch of people on it who are not scientists.
Yeah,
we need artists. We need writers.
Absolutely,
we need
yes.
philosophers. We need people who don't think the way scientists do. We need salespeople. We need, people who understand human nature and how to connect with people. We need pundits. So there are all kinds of aspects to human intelligence. Yes, Bill's waiting for his ticket. So there are all these aspects, and I think you give it short shrift if you're in your little computer coding silo and you think you understand what human intelligence is about, or if you just happen to be transgender and you're really offended. And by the way, in case some of us are getting a little alarmed that 9,000 people at Google were protesting the presence of this so-called transphobic person on this AI board, keep in mind that at any given time, there are 9,000 Google employees outside in the dope smoking lounge enjoying a joint. So this is like, it's a really big company. So this is not this is not that impressive. I guess the how we prevent somebody from Google from doing this way is good old-fashioned capitalistic competition and having other firms that are able to take that guy that they kicked off their board and embrace him and let him be part of their development of AI.
There's a lot to this story that I find particularly interesting, and I'll just kind of hash at them just real quick. First of all, if you're talking about a machine that is the entire kind of AI that we're talking about is in fact humanity's final invention. I mean, that's really what it is. It is the final thing that we as humans would invent, would be something that is smarter than we are. And from that point forward, everything else that we try to invent will not be as good as the thing that's invented by the creature that we've invented to be smarter than us. So it's our last invention, and we'd better be pretty careful about getting this one right. So the first thing that bothers me about this is this. I have enormous respect for science. I have a tremendous, unbelievable admiration for what we are able to do with a cantaloupe-sized hunk of jelly encased in bone. It's absolutely miraculous what we can do with the human brain. But science is not a religion, science is not a philosophy, science is not a giant encyclopedia storehouse where information is kept. Science is a method of preventing human bias from creeping into investigations into the subject of natural phenomenon. And when humans start screwing up the science, the procedure of science, it starts to make me worried. So, as far as the firing of somebody who's different than you are, those of you who are recording for Media Matters, you can begin your out of context insert right here. If it were me, and I'm as serious as I can be, if I was going to have a program, a panel of people who were going to determine the future of artificial intelligence, I would not only want a conservative, I'd want a Nazi, I'd want a communist, I'd want some fundamental Islamic fundamentalists. I would want every single opinion on the planet, from its most radical and abhorrent to its most wonderful, because in that interplay of ideas, we would learn the truths about how reprehensible some ideas actually are, instead of this smug assurance that we've got the answer. And this brings me to the second issue that I find just extremely disturbing, and that is this virtue signaling on the part of people who are essentially as selfish as they can be. We're still very early in AI, but let's go to something that is historical and that we have 50, 60, 70 years worth of evidence on. And that's the development of the last time we had this kind of a technological potential. You could argue the last time was genetic decoding. So let's go back to the atomic bomb and the Manhattan Project. When the Manhattan Project succeeded, and in the years afterwards, when it became declassified, we learned that a number of the actual physicists involved with the project had deep moral reservations about using this technology as a weapon to be employed against people. And this I find to be the most cowardly, disgraceful, disingenuous position that any human being could take. There's not a person involved with the Manhattan Project who didn't know fully well what that physics was being used for, didn't understand completely that this was for the specific purpose to create an atomic bomb to end the war. And scientists who claim to have been opposed to the weapon that came out of that program are lying to themselves when they say, well, we just did it for the sake of science. You knew full well what the science was being used for, and your curiosity and your scientific desire to get an answer trumped what you pretend to be your moral code. And I see the exact same thing going on here with artificial intelligence. I have heard hundreds of TED Talks, it seems, where computer scientists have assured us that we have nothing to fear from artificial intelligence because they will program into the learning algorithms that this AI uses, they will program in a series of inhibitions that will prevent this from being used for something other than what humanity wants, which to me is like a bunch of chimps in a laboratory deciding that by scattering bananas around the lab, we will be able to prevent the humans from taking over the chimpanzees and the rest of the world and bringing new chimps into the lab. When you are dealing with something that is beyond your level of intelligence, you do not know what the answer is going to be. You don't know. And if you think you know, then you really don't know. And so if we're going to be talking about a new frontier, we need to be taking this from a position of what is the worst that can happen. And right now, in April of 2019, the worst that could happen is to have a bunch of AI scientists sitting around smugly telling us that everything that they previously believe is going to be exactly what this super machine is going to believe, and we don't have a thing to worry about. When people say, I don't have anything to worry about, that's when I start worrying about things.